What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. There comes a moment in every long war when slogans stop working, when speeches, parades, and carefully edited television segments collide with something far more stubborn. Math. Not ideology, not bravado, just numbers. How many people can you send in, how many do not come back, how many you can replace, and how many you cannot. That moment has quietly arrived for Russia a long time ago. Not too many want to acknowledge it, especially inside the Kremlin, but, well, it did. Despite all the confident messaging from the Kremlin, despite repeated assurances that recruitment is stable and the situation is, guess what, under control, the math has started drifting in the very wrong direction. Month after month, losses on the front lines are beginning to outpace the number of new contracts signed. Not dramatically, not catastrophically, well, yet consistently enough to cause unease inside Moscow's own planning circles. And when the system built on avoidance starts to crack, it does not suddenly collapse. It adapts, it stretches, it searches for new loopholes. This story is not just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about how the Russian state is reacting to an uncomfortable reality. That the old recruitment tricks are losing effectiveness. Open mobilization remains politically radioactive, untouchable. Yet the gap still has to be filled somehow. So today, let's break this down step by step. First, the imbalance in self. Then the legal reshaping of conscription. After that, the expansion beyond Russia's borders. And finally, the human cost reflected in the very real cases from countries that now are pushing back hard. For a long time, Russia managed to maintain the illusion of balance. 1 month would roughly cancel out the next one. Losses here, contracts there. In December, the numbers nearly matched, hovering around the mid-30,000 people range. But January disrupted that fragile equilibrium. According to Western assessments and Ukrainian military data, Russian battlefield losses exceeded recruitment by close to 9,000 personnel in a single month. That's, as you can see, not a rounding error or whatever, it's a structural problem. This shift did not happen because of some dramatic breakthrough or cinematic offensive. It happened because the battlefield itself changed. Ukraine's expanded use of drones, new weapons we talked about in previous episodes, all this has made exposure more costly and rotation more difficult. Units that once cycled in and out now live under constant observation. Advances stall, pressure builds, and the replacement flow cannot just quite keep up. Even Russian commanders have quietly acknowledged that territorial gains have slowed to a crawl, with the progress measured in meters rather than kilometers. What makes this particularly uncomfortable for the Kremlin is that this imbalance appears without a declared mobilization. Moscow has spent years insisting it can sustain the war through contracts alone. That claim becomes harder to defend when the total number of troops on the battlefield remains static despite rising recruitment targets. The implication is obvious. New arrivals are compensating for deaths, not expanding capabilities of the military. And here is the key problem. Once losses consistently outpace recruitment, the system stops being flexible. It becomes reactive. Every month turns into a scramble to plug gaps rather than build capacity. The leadership knows this. That's why the talk of not a reason for celebration keeps appearing even already in Ukrainian assessments at this point. Just think about it. Russian losses appearing and not celebrating in Ukrainian assessments. Because this is not about collapse tomorrow. It's about pressure accumulating quietly, forcing decisions that Moscow would rather avoid. Guys, you ever notice how the same intelligence report can feel either almost casual or, well, deeply alarming? Just based on the headline. Simple as that. For example, look at this story right now. One says, Putin thinks he can outsmart the US during Ukraine peace talks, a European intelligence chief says. Well, that framing feels political, almost strategic, like this is about negotiation tactics, diplomacy, maybe even some clever chess move at the table. But then you scroll down a little bit, and then you find another headline which says, Estonia says Russia is building up its military to reshape the European balance of power. Well, same underlying story, completely different emotional signal, right? I think everyone can agree, right? One sounds like a mind game, the other sounds like a warning siren. This is exactly why I use ground news. Instead of getting fed one version by an algorithm, you can compare headlines side by side and instantly see how different outlets frame the very same situation. You start noticing the language choices once again. Outsmart, peace talks, reshape power, military build-up. Those words are not neutral. They shape how you understand what's happening. They are emotional words. Ground news also shows you who is covering the story, gives you comparison between left, center and right-wing media. It even uses AI to highlight the differences, so you can tell whether you are seeing diplomacy emphasized or just a long-term security risk being thrown at you. That's not about eliminating bias, it's about being aware of it and thinking for yourself. And so if you want 40% off the Vantage plan, the best one, scan this QR code you see on the screen or use my link down below, ground.news/RussianDude, and please subscribe. Stop reading just one version of reality, see the full picture instead. Thanks so much Ground News for sponsoring this video, and now back to the program. When Vladimir Putin signed legislation moving Russia towards year-round conscription, it was not framed as an emergency measure. On paper, nothing radical happened. The traditional spring and fall intake windows still remain. Conscripts still depart during these fixed periods. But the machinery behind the scenes now runs continuously, which is medical exams, psychological screenings, draft commissions, digital summonses. All of it can happen any day of the year now. This is not an administrative convenience. It is a structural adjustment designed to eliminate downtime. Under the old system, recruitment officers surged just out of nowhere twice a year, and then that's it, went completely quiet, Russian men relaxed and just kept on going with their lives. But under the new system, pressure is constant. Men do not disappear from the system when the season ends. They remain permanently visible, permanently targeted, and permanently processed. And the decree setting a 261,000 new people target for 2026, which is the increase from 2025, made this even more clear. For the first time, the entire year is treated as a single intake cycle. No pauses, no reset, just a steady pipeline feeding the same front lines that already struggle to absorb replacements fast enough. Supporters claim that just it reduces bottlenecks, makes everything fast and smooth, but critics see something entirely different. Preparation for something big. And the Kremlin understands one thing very well. A sudden announcement of mass mobilization would trigger immediate backlash. It already happened in 2022 when thousands fled the country overnight. And the memory of that episode obviously has not faded. Yet, and maybe it never will. So instead of repeating it, Moscow is normalizing pressure, stretching the draft across the calendar, making conscription feel less like an event and more like a background noise. The expiration limit on digital summoners also fits neatly into the strategy. 30 days. No more indefinite limbo. You're either processed or replaced with another name. The system becomes efficient, but also relentless. And efficiency in this context is not about fairness. It's about showing results. If 10,000 men need to be drafted from a particular region, then 10,000 men will be delivered in one way or another. No more excuses. Well, yet guess what? Even this is apparently not enough. Because there are limits to how much pressure can be applied internally before resistance resurfaces. Which is why the recruitment net does not stop at Russia borders anymore. That expansion is the next piece of the puzzle, and it deserves closer attention in our next chapter. Once domestic recruitment reaches diminishing returns, the surge naturally moves outward. Russia's approach to foreign recruitment is not new, but its scale and urgency have grown noticeably. Incentives are tailored carefully. For migrants already inside Russia, military service becomes a shortcut to residency or citizenship. For those abroad, contracts are marketed as employment opportunities, security jobs or even logistical roles. Not in the front lines, they claim. Well, guess what? The reality is always revealed much later. So men from South Asia, Africa, parts of Middle East have found themselves drawn into this system. Some arrive voluntarily attracted by salaries that make local wages look miserable. Others report being misled outright. Language barriers, unfamiliar legal systems, and lack of support that make these recruits particularly vulnerable once they're inside the pipeline. According to independent counts, thousands of foreign nationals from dozens of countries have passed through Russian units. Some never return home. Others resurface months later, concussed, injured, or stranded. From Moscow's perspective, this pool offers two advantages. First, it supplements manpower without inflaming domestic opinion. And second, it keeps politically sensitive demographics inside Russia slightly more insulated from direct exposure. But this strategy carries risks. Foreign governments notice when their citizens vanish. Families start asking questions, media investigations accumulate, and the narrative shifts from voluntarily enlistment to something much harder to defend internationally. Even within Russia, activists point out that foreign recruits often receive the very most dangerous assignments, precisely because they are easier to replace and just harder to track. This is no longer just about numbers. It's about reputation, diplomacy, and the growing cost of maintaining denial. Eventually, individual cases break through the media silence. Countries respond, pressure mounts, and the story stops being theoretical. That is precisely where we need to turn next. So let's turn a closer look at the specific examples in our final chapter. The backlash did not start in Moscow, it started abroad, in Kenya to be specific. And this is where officials began to notice a pattern. Young men living through unofficial channels, families receiving fragments of information weeks later, bodies not returned. The government estimates around 200 Kenyans were recruited, many through deceptive intermediaries promising work overseas. Recruitment agencies were shut down, officials spoke up publicly, the foreign minister even announced plans to confront Moscow directly. Come to Moscow and speak with them, like man-to-man, face-to-face. The language was unusually blunt. Words like unacceptable, there will be a response, words that not typically used in, diplomatic talk. Kenya even began providing psychological care to those who managed to return, acknowledging the long-term impact of what they had experienced. A similar story unfolded in South Africa. Distress calls reached authorities from citizens trapped near the front lines. Imagine this. Investigations pointed to networks offering training or employment that turned into something entirely different. Reports documented hundreds recruited across the continent, with dozens never coming back. The issue escalated to presidential discussions. Requests for repatriation were made directly to the Kremlin. And what is striking here is not just the numbers, it is the shift in tone. These governments are no longer quietly handling consular issues. They are publicly accusing Russia of exploitative practices, of treating foreign nationals as expendable, of exporting risk while importing silence. For Moscow, this creates a very huge dilemma. Foreign recruitment helps sustain the war effort, but it also generates diplomatic friction that undermines claims of legitimacy. Each returned recruit tells a very different story. Some of them, are the same, but, every story is different in one way or another. Each unreturned body leaves a question then, and every investigation chips away at the narrative of voluntarism. This is where all threads come into a single yarn. Losses exceeding recruitment, legal systems adjusted to maximize pressure, foreign manpower stolen to delay domestic reckoning, and now international pushback exposing the human cost. None of these elements alone force a turning point. Together, they form a very strong case against Putin. Russia's war effort is no longer just a military campaign, it's a balancing act between numbers, perception, and political survival. The Kremlin is trying to fight a high-intensity conflict with low-visibility tools. Contracts instead of actual draft, bureaucratic reform instead of announcements, foreign recruits instead of domestic backlash. But once again, arithmetic does not negotiate, it's just pure cold numbers. Every month when losses exceed recruitment even slightly reduces flexibility. Every legal workaround signals anticipation of future strain. Every foreign case that reaches international headlines narrows Moscow's room to maneuver. This does not mean that the collapse is imminent. It means that the system is being stretched in ways that reveal its underlying limits. And history shows that when states reach this phase, choices become much harder, not easier. The longer this imbalance persists, the fewer painless options remain. That is the quiet story unfolding behind the headlines. Not a sudden turning point, but a slow accumulation of pressure that no amount of propaganda can fully absorb. Well, there you have it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much Ground News for sponsoring this video. Please use the links down below or scan the QR code you see on the screen. Thanks so much for watching. See you on Tuesday. Just
sway. We do not believe in ridiculous Russian propaganda.